You're going to love hearing about this from censorial YouTube, so presumably censorial Google. Now, last week I interviewed Alliance for Democracy and Freedom leader Dr. Tek Kong, a doctor of over 40 years, and some of his early training was spent in clinical trialing. The sort of clinical trialing that companies like Pfizer, who made that marvellous medical intervention with a 100% success rate and no harms to anyone during the recent pandemic. So I spoke to him and he told me about his worries when he read about this medical intervention and an emergency license, and the fact that the companies involved prior to this medical intervention had been some of the most heavily fined pharmaceutical companies in history. They've obviously turned over a new leaf now. The fact that they've told porcupines in the past is absolutely irrelevant when we're talking about this 2020 to say 2023, an ongoing medical intervention. All that was past, all that bad stuff. It's like a burglar. It's like a burglar breaking into houses, going to prison. When he gets out, never tempted again. So that's the sort of conversation that we had. Being a doctor of 40 years, he had a lot of anecdotal evidence of what he'd seen in his surgery from sort of 2021 onwards, with no real idea of why 15-year-old patients were coming in with myocarditis. He couldn't think why it could be. It certainly couldn't be anything to do with the marvellous medical interventions that had happened that year, the medical innovations, the fantastic response to the pandemic. Couldn't have been anything to do with that, but nonetheless it was anecdotal about what he'd seen as a doctor of 40 years. Now, I don't know who the fact checkers are for YouTube. I don't know who the censors are for YouTube. I could have a very good guess, but I couldn't stand here and give you misinformation or disinformation about who they are or who YouTube actually works for. But what I do know is our discussion, which covered all sorts of subjects, not just a certain medical intervention, but how he would go about saving the NHS, his thoughts on illegal migration and mass immigration that just doesn't allow for assimilation into the local communities. It was a wonderful discussion, but apparently, look here, it broke YouTube guidelines on misinformation. Now, I would say information is when you say something is absolute fact. But discussing something, I don't see how that can be misinformation or disinformation. All it is a doctor of 40 years giving his viewpoint on the said medical intervention, giving his viewpoint on any marvellous clinical trials, on any potential medication that could be used in a medical intervention, giving his views on how the clinical trials were carried out and what was behind a terrible disease that needed an emergency license medical intervention. Just his views. And as a doctor of 40 years, just like those, not just doctors, but professors who signed the Barrington Declaration, he was censored. Our in discussion video disappeared. It wasn't even listed. It was in the unlisted section for him to look at to see if it could go out when YouTube deleted it and gave the channel a strike. That's YouTube. YouTube, that marvellous organisation who seemingly aren't censorial at all. YouTube, owned by Google, a totally trustworthy company. So, with all that going on, I was personally shocked that there was a strike, particularly on an unlisted video. But it showed me that you can't talk about some things on YouTube, particularly medical interventions, certain medical interventions, without censorship raising its ugly head. And then I thought, what other things do Google censor? Probably nothing, because they're such a great company. So if you're waiting for the In Discussion with Dr. Tech Kong video, we're going to remake it just for YouTube, and we'll replace certain words and certain phraseology just to make it acceptable for our censors at YouTube and Google. Felt I had to get this out there, because what a world when you can't discuss, not provide disinformation, not provide misinformation, but also not provide anecdotal opinion. Sad, sad days. Be careful out there, folks. Seems we've got two-tier YouTube. Seems we've got two-tier Google. Oh no, we can't have. They're such great companies. Okay, thanks for watching. And yeah, I'll be back with another video soon. Please subscribe to the channel and throw the video a like. And go over and have a look at the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. No whip. So if ever they get to the prominence I think they probably deserve with a leader like Dr. Tech Kong, without taking the Yankee dollar, without taking money and donations from World Economic Forum linked hedge fund managers like the most prominent 4 or 5 political parties in this country do, then they'll be working for you. There'll be no whip. Your individual candidate who you've voted for will be able to vote using your views. Please subscribe to the party. They need those memberships to be able to afford to challenge for things like council elections, and if there is another general election, a general election. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Speak soon. Bye.